On Earth, there comes a moment when governments resort to extreme measures and release poisonous substances into the world to reduce the population.
Money's the only god you have left. Take him to the Snake Eyes, sweet.
People were leading their normal lives when one day planes appeared in the sky, dispersing a black substance that caused death to anyone exposed to it. Those whose bodies proved resistant to the poison were left to cling to the remnants of the past or adapt to the new reality. The government was absent, and taking advantage of this, gangs proliferated in the American Midwest, dividing territories and eliminating dissenters. One of these groups wore animal heads and called themselves Players, alongside others known as the Plowers, Cherries, Killers, and many more. One day, Mark West, in the hope of saving their crumbling marriage, agrees to take his wife to her parents' house in Milwaukee. His friend tries to convince him to take a more suitable car, but Mark loves his car too much and doesn't want to abandon it. Almost immediately, the car breaks down. Mark and Nina find an abandoned auto repair shop, and while Mark is fixing the breakdown, Nina looks at old photographs and listens to the radio. At that moment, the doors open, and several armed men enter. The couple is saved by the fact that they are in a separate room. Mark asks his wife to step on the gas. The car crashes through the wall and out of the room just as another gang bursts through the open doors, crushing the initial arrivals. Mark's car starts just in the nick of time, and they barely manage to escape their pursuers. The radio host reminds them of the need to find shelter for the night, since gangs are roaming everywhere, so Mark turns towards what appears to be an abandoned house. The couple explores the house, and while Nina gathers anything that might be useful, Mark discovers mutilated bodies in the bedroom. While Nina tries to contact her mother, Mark carries the bodies outside and sets them on fire. They spend the night in a guest bedroom. Mark plots a path, choosing routes that are free from the executioner's gang, while Nina recalls how her husband had tried to ask her father for a magnificent collector's pistol and hopes that if they make it out unscathed, her father will still give it to Mark. Nina extinguishes a candle, unaware that they are being watched by a man who is captured by the executioner's gang next morning, and, under torture, reveals information about the traveling couple. After disposing of the informant, the gang heads to the house where Nina and Mark are resting. Mark goes through his morning routine when he hears the sound of a motorcycle engine. He hides his wife in the attic and conceals himself in the house. One of the gang members goes upstairs while Nina puts on headphones and plays music to drown out the footsteps of the killer. The faint noise alarms him, and the man turns his back to the door to the room, which costs him his life as he is killed with a single precise blow to the head. His partner spots Mark and attacks him. A fight ensues, during which Mark manages to strike the bandit in the eye with a makeshift weapon, leaving him lying on the living room floor. Having escaped the danger, the couple continues on, unaware of any surveillance. Soon, Mark and Nina stop at a looted supermarket. People are attempting to replenish their supplies when a masked man appears in front of them and orders Mark to drop his gun. Suddenly, he removes his mask and extends his hand. Mark doesn't trust his friendliness, but the man lifts and hands back Mark's gun. Mark then shakes his hand. Nate Wood is glad to meet normal people, but at that moment, the sound of engines can be heard, and the new acquaintance instructs the couple to hide. A group of bandits enters the store, and it turns out they are also looking for the couple. Unfazed by the situation, Nate invites the couple to dinner, showing them a photo of his wife, Teresa. Suddenly, there is a burst of machine gun fire, and the bandits fall, while Nate's son, Steve, emerges from hiding. Upon stepping outside, Nate insists that the couple join him. The road ahead is long, and they haven't seen normal people in a while, so they would be happy to treat them to dinner and wine. Mark and Nina agree. Nate takes the pickup truck while he attaches the family's car to a trailer, explaining that it's for safety. Along the way, they are stopped by members of the Plowers gang. They exchange news, and the gang's leader, upon seeing Nina, suggests to Nate that he sell her. Nate laughs it off, saying that they are his friends. The bandit boasts about capturing a girl who is sitting in his cab, whom he named Betsy. Mark and Nina sense tension between the conversing parties, but Steve reassures them that the Plowers gang is weak and won't go against his father. As it turns out, he's right. The bandits clear the road, and Nate takes the family to his home, unaware that Mark's adversary, who survived, is trailing them. Inside Nate's house, he questions Mark about the purpose of their journey and advises Nina to open her eyes. If their relatives aren't responding, they are most likely no longer alive. Just then, Teresa invites everyone to the table. People enjoy peace and delicious food, and when a song comes on the radio that Teresa calls their song, the couple dances, bringing smiles to the children's faces. Steve talks about the bandits they encountered, while Nina, unable to bear hearing about violence, asks Nate's daughter, Bella, to take her to the children's room. Teresa accompanies them, and the women discuss family matters. Meanwhile, the men wash the dishes, and the host confesses that they just ate human flesh. Mark feels nauseous as Nate gives a speech about how only the ruthless have survived. He informs them that either the couple stays with them or he'll let them become prey. Women arrive, sensing something is amiss, but then a bandit enters through the back door, holding Bella hostage. He's willing to release the girl in exchange for Mark and Nina. Nathan agrees, and the villain lets the girl go, but aims at Mark. As the bandit takes aim, Steve, who had stealthily approached the bandit, cuts his leg with a knife. The bandit falls, but manages to pull the trigger, and a bullet hits Teresa. While Nathan is distracted, Mark and Nina make a run for it, hop into their host's car, and drive away. Gunshots continue to echo from the house. They drive down the road, and Nina confesses that she can no longer play these insane survival games. They argue, unaware that ahead of them lies an ambush set by people hiding their faces behind animal masks. A shot rings out, and Nina is hit in the shoulder. Mark quickly turns the car around. Meanwhile, Nathan contacts the leader of the Plowers, and, informing him that his wife and daughter are dead, allows them to take the blonde. An enthusiastic bandit heads to the garage where he receives a blow to the head from Betsy. Armed, she then releases the captive women, revealing that she belongs to the Cherry Gang, and drives the gang leader's car out of the gate. In the meantime, Mark finds a small house in the wilderness, tends to Nina's wound, and puts her to bed. He then goes out in search of food. Nina wakes up and discovers notes from her husband all around, helping her navigate the house. She gets dressed and, after looking around, starts packing a suitcase, intending to leave alone when Mark enters a nearby room. Silence prevails everywhere, so he goes upstairs and finds Nathan and Steve, tied up with bags over their heads. But when he questions how they got there, a very colorful character enters the room, suggesting they have some fun because, after all, showtime is his life. Meanwhile, Betsy drives down the road, listening to the screams of the bandit she locked in the trunk. Suddenly, she notices Nina behind some bushes and goes after her, while the bandit, who introduces himself as William Cunningham, tries to find out why Nathan and Steve were tailing Mark. Mark recognizes the quotes William is using, and William is pleased with his erudition. He then introduces his buddy, Big Guy, and offers to have a fight with him, promising to let Mark go if he wins. During this time, Nina stumbles upon a box of records, and on one of the envelopes, there's a note asking to give her husband another chance. She finds some alcohol, plays music, and, under Betsy's watchful eye, loses herself in the music while her husband fights the brute. Mark takes a beating until his opponent throws him right at William, and Mark ends up with William's gun, which he promptly fires, ending the showman's life. Betsy makes a decision and kills the bandit in the trunk just as Mark bids farewell to Nathan, Steve, and Big Guy. Mark returns to the house where he left Nina and shoots with the rifle found in the yard. For the first time, Nina shows an interest in firearms, and Mark teaches her how to shoot, which she turns out to be surprisingly good at. She leads her husband to the garage when Betsy enters the house and finds a ring that Nina had taken off when contemplating running away from her husband. And at that moment, she shows her husband a card just like his, and upon learning that he wasn't very popular with girls and thus didn't experience familiar sensations felt by many American guys, she suggests rectifying that in the car. The process is interrupted by the animal-masked bandits who capture the couple and take them to their base. There, they are brought into a room and seated at a table with 2 sticks attached to it, each with a gun affixed. Their hands are fastened to the gun handles, and they are offered to play a game. 1 bullet in the chambers, and if they're lucky and don't shoot each other for 6 rounds, the couple will be set free. Nina then asks to add more bullets, but reduce the number of rounds, which the bandits agree to. The couple begins the game, and in the second round, Mark is shot in the shoulder. The crowd rejoices, and the 2 ladies start squabbling, which helps Nina free her hand. She grabs the judge's gun, shoots him, and fires at the sticks holding the pistols. Then she positions her shoulder under Mark's semi-conscious body and makes her way to the door. She is intercepted by the brothel's leader, But under the barrel of gun, she has no choice but to let the family go, since people with weapons are not allowed in the room according to their rules. The couple gets into a car and drives away while the gang arms itself and starts chasing them, losing a couple of sentries to Betsy's gunfire. Nina presses the gas pedal and finally arrives in Milwaukee, where she learns that her parents have passed away. Neighbors hand her a letter addressed to their daughter, in which her mother asks Nina not to abandon her husband. Later, neighbors show her how they have fortified their defense. Barricades made of cars on the roads, a constant lookout on the roof, and a tripwire stretched across the street that can be activated with a winch. If someone drives over the tripwire, it triggers an explosion sufficient to demolish a house. At this point, the town is greeted by a longtime friend of her father, Phil, while Betsy infiltrates one of the houses and sets up a shooting platform by the window. Meanwhile, Nina overhears Phil reporting her arrival to someone. She goes to his house, but the man hides behind blinds. Then his radio comes to life, reporting that they are 1 minute away, and Nina recognizes the voice. She realizes that the bandits are heading to the town, and upon seeing a neighboring girl on the road, she hides her in a house. She grabs a rifle and prepares to confront the players. The gang stops their cars right under the window of the house where Betsy is positioned, and the sentry also aims at them. Nina opens fire, immediately supported by Betsy, taking down half of the gang. At that moment, the girl escapes from the house, and while Mark tries to catch her, one of the bandits attacks him. Nina throws a homemade grenade at the cars, and Mark kills his attacker with the bandit's own horn. Phil watches in horror as Betsy gets wounded. And there, Nina sees the speeding Plowware's car, which can easily sweep away anyone in its path. She rushes to the winch and tightens the tripwire, which the armored car brushes aside. But then, the explosives go off, and the car flips over. Among the attackers, only one female bandit remains, who heads into the house where the wounded Betsy is at that moment, handing Mark her ring before succumbing to a bullet fired by the bandit. The bandit queen prepares to shoot Mark, but she receives a bullet from Nina. While Mark recovers from the transformation of his wife, she confronts Phil and finds bloody footprints of a child and a murdered man. On the table, Nina finds a familiar box, takes it, and goes home, encountering a neighboring girl with bloody hands on the street. Nina hands the box to her husband, and he finds the long-desired pistol of her father inside. Then he places the lost ring back on her finger. The couple leaves the town in search of a better place, while the radio reports about a family that has destroyed a bunch of bandits, so the villains need to rethink their actions.